Scripture stories in my mind to use this morning, and I have chosen this one, Luke 25, 31 through 46. If you'll just allow me to read it to you. But first of all, I just want to say that I've been looking forward to this morning because we are going to hear about someone who had a beautiful ministry to the least ones, a ministry to the least ones, and that's the story that we're going to be talking about in Luke. I don't know nearly as much as I would like to know about Mother Teresa, the topic of our discussion today. I am going to know more now because we are going to be listening to someone who has actually worked with her. This is too awesome, way too awesome for me to get my mind around. I'm just so looking forward to it, but also because Maury gave to me this morning a gift of a book about Mother Teresa. And my family knows how much I treasure books, but you probably don't know yourself what a magnitude of a gift that is to me. So I just really appreciate that. So I will know more about her after today and after I read that book and make it a part of me. I digest books. I eat them. The scripture verse that I'm going to be reading this morning, Luke 25, 31 through 46, is about someone who I think just understands this. Several years ago, there was an article in Time magazine about Mother Teresa that caused quite a stir. The author of the article, I can't say his last name, K-O-L-O-D-I-E-J-C-H-U-K. That's it. And it was an article, if many of you have seen it, it caused quite a stir because it talked about Mother Teresa's doubts and her struggles. And it was magnificent to me. It was beautiful to me. I just really related to it. Here's one statement. Jesus, my own Jesus, Mother Teresa is quoted as saying, I am only thine. I am so stupid. I do not know what to say, but do with me whatever you wish, as long as you wish. But why can't I be a perfect Laredo nun here? Why can't I be like everybody else? And the soul and the humanity in that is just unbelievable to me. It just rings painfully and wonderfully true to me. I mean, that's just my attitude a lot of times. I am so stupid. I am so inept. I am so unable to do the task that God has called me to. But here's what Mother Teresa hears from her Lord. I want Indian nuns, missionaries of charity, who would be my fire of love against the poor, the sick, the dying, and the little children. You are, I know, the most incapable person, weak and sinful, but just because you are that, I want to use you for my glory. Wilt thou refuse? That's lovely. That's lovely. So here are the scripture verses from Matthew 25. I'll begin at 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me. Then he will say to those at his left hand, 'You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they also will answer, 'Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you?' And then he will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me.' And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." And may God add his blessing to that reading.
You probably have picked up, we have a guest speaker today, and that is Maury Devolder. I have known Maury. He's been a friend of mine for 20 years at least. Professionally and personally, I've known Maury. And it wasn't until this year, I think a few months ago, that Maury was in to see me, and he just offhandedly told me that he had worked with Mother Teresa. And of course I said, "Well, you don't really mean the Mother Teresa." And he said, "Yes, Mother Teresa in India." So, knowing Maury as I do, it did not surprise me a bit that Maury had spent time in India at one time. And I'm looking forward to what he has to share with us today. Now, those in the back might have trouble hearing because Maury is very soft-spoken. So, with Maury, with no further ado, please come on up and share with us.
It's going. I am now technical. Good morning. They call me Mo. All right? Rock. It's rock, right? Brock. Brock with a B. I saw there was one rock, now there's two. I thought two rocks in the same building. Brock, I got to hand it to you, man. You took me on a trip when you started singing Holy, Holy, Holy. I hadn't sang that song since I was 16 years old. I'm 66, 50 years. I'm in this church on Possum Run. Some guy starts singing Holy, Holy. And I remember the words, every last one of them. Mind-blowing. Corey and I had a wonderful conversation a few minutes ago about what this place used to look like long before you touched this place. This is amazing. I've been in this church since it was a wreck. 25, 26 years ago, it was a mess. What an experience. The old man who you talked about, Kentucky Colonel. I'm a Kentucky Colonel. I know how to earn being a Kentucky Colonel. That's an amazing status for that old man. It takes a lot of work to become a Kentucky Colonel. And Fred doesn't like cheese. Neither do I. Is Fred a vegan? Is he a vegan? I don't know. He just doesn't like cheese. The minute you said that, I said, my God, there's a vegan in this community. It's like, holy smokes. Anyway, I got to tell you something. The way this all happened, okay, Tim gave you a little prelude to it, all right? Tim and I had a conversation, and Amy and I just got married. A couple of weeks ago, after living like 7 years in sin, we decided we should get married so that we could go to wherever we're going to go next. But anyway, I came to Tim in the office, and he said, "You know what was amazing about your wedding, Maury?" He says, "You never mentioned God." And I looked at him, and I said, "Tim, it was a beautiful day. There's trees all around you. We're in the midst of a forest. We have 150 people. We have food. We have good music. We have celebration. God's presence was everywhere. I didn't have to mention his name." And he said to me, he said, "When did you get this point of view?" Tim and I go back like 20, 25 years. All right? I suspect I'm calling him Tim when you might call him Reverend Davis. But I call him Tim. Well, actually, I don't call him Tim. I call him the Wizard. I've been calling him the Wizard for about 20 years now. And the reason why I call him the Wizard is he has got this unbelievable gift of being able to put his hands on people and making them feel well. That is a spiritual area that's untouchable. And I'm glad to have him as a friend. Very, very good friend. And I hope that goes on for another 100 years. He asked me, when did you get this point of view? I didn't always have it. I was born and raised a Catholic. I went to Catholic grade school. I went to Catholic high schools. I had a very, very narrow prospect to spirituality, to religion, to faith, because I was born a Catholic. My mother's 91, she is still a Catholic. We have discussions that will just rock the halls. And that's, I believed, was the path that I should take. And then one day I asked a question. I said, what's on the other side? What's on the outside of this church, this religion? And my mother told me I didn't need to know that because I was born a Catholic. And at that point I said, I need to know that. About that same time I was going to the University of Toledo and I got in some trouble. There was an organization called the Students for a Democratic Society, the SDS. If some of you have been around that long, they were a pretty radical group of people. Well, I got in some trouble and the University of Toledo asked me to leave. So my mother's questioning, I'm questioning my faith. I'm questioning my education because I was dismissed and there was no reason for it from my point of view. And I said, I got to escape. And in my generation, that escape involved a place called Haight-Ashbury, where people grew their hair long and had beards and did drugs day in and day out, just in search of who they were. And I went there, and I did that. And one day I found my way on a ship, an Italian freighter going to Australia. Don't ask me how I got there, because to this day I don't have any idea. I love my alcohol, I love my drugs, and I was on my way to Melbourne, Australia. And when I got to Melbourne, I had no money. I said, well, I got to get back. So I called my mother on the phone. She sent me $100 and said, have a good trip home. It was Mother's Day, 1969. I was a lost soul. I wandered. I get into all kinds of trouble. Anything to survive. Searching for myself. Tim asked me, can you pinpoint when it happened? And at that point I said, I don't know, but you know what I've done over the last week since we've talked? I pinpointed it. I went back into my logs and my history and looked at it. January 29th, 1970, I can pinpoint it. Was that the day that somebody gave me the blessing? No. Was that the day that I met Mother Teresa? No. I'll stick it in my pocket. They're going to be able to hear me in there? Hello! That was the day that I woke up in the Mojahal slums of Calcutta, India, on the streets, in my underwear, and everything I had was gone. When you were a traveler, or a flower child, or a hippie, or whatever you want to, the one thing that you never really cared about was your physical well-being. And you always searched for a stimulus that might give you an experience. Well, I was searching for a stimulus in Calcutta, India, and I ran into a bunch of French hippies. Well, on the road, French hippies were the most dangerous hippies there were, because they would get you real high, and then they would strip you of everything you had. And sure enough, I'd fallen into that path. And what they did is they took everything I owned, cameras, passport, money, clothes, and they left me in my underwear, lying on the streets of Calcutta, India. not Detroit, not Cleveland, not San Francisco, Calcutta, India. How long I've been laying there, I have no idea. I sat up and I sat on the curb. I looked at my arms, they were covered in mud. My face was covered in mud. I was covered in dirt. I looked across the street and there was a guy sitting at a table looking at me. Looked down the street, just completely disoriented to everything that has to do with life. Scared to death. Totally. And I looked across the street and that guy was still looking at me. I sat there for about 10 minutes. And then the guy got up from his seat. He was drinking tea in a little tea shop across the street from where I was laying in the mud. His name was Bill Facey. And Bill came up to me and he says, you look like you might need some help. And I said, really? What gave you that idea? He said, come on with me. And he took me to a place called St. Joseph's Home for the Poor in 19 Zacharias Street, Calcutta, India. 1,200 street orphans. The largest orphanage in the world. There wasn't one orphan in sight. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. Walked in, there wasn't an orphan in sight. Took me in, showed me where I could bathe, not shower, bathe. You take the coffee can, you dump it over your head, you scrub, you know. That's the way you do things. Get all the dirt off of you. Brought me some clothes, some white linens. Asked me if I wanted a haircut, my beard cut. I said, no, not yet. It was longer and longer than it is right now. I just sat there. He said, what is this place? He said, well, I'll tell you what. There's this nun. She may show up in the next couple of weeks. But she had, what did she call it? A need for a second self. She didn't know if she wanted to be a nun or not. She had been in France. The Pope decided that it would be a good idea if she went somewhere where he didn't have to face the headache that she was throwing at him, the questions that she was throwing, similar to what Teresa was telling. She asked herself right up to the end that question. Am I relevant? Am I really supposed to be a nun? What is this? I don't understand. All I know is that I want to work with people. Spirit. And God said, I got a place for you. Even though you don't think you're capable, I got a place for you. And he sent her to India. These 1,200 children that she worked with every day would show up on her doorstep at 6 o'clock at night. They would feed them. They would bathe them. They would give them clothes if need be. They would let them sleep there. And then at 6 o'clock the next morning, they would wake up and they would have a huge breakfast. And then they would open the doors. And from 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock during the day in Calcutta, they were all street beggars. They cut them loose like a swarm of bees coming out of a hive. It was the most mind-blowing experience I'd ever had in my life. Where are they going? Calcutta. By the way, Mojile slums in Calcutta is why Calcutta has the name the Black Hole. That is the Black Hole. It's a horrible, horrible place. Filthy, horrible. And 1,200 kids are cut loose every single day. Where are their parents? Sitting on the street begging. They never leave their spot. The kids run and the parents sit. One day the death wagon comes through and picks up the parents and throws them onto a death wagon and takes them down to the Ganges and they cremate them. That's their life. This nun that Bill Facey talked to me about, says she came here wanting to help these people with no idea who she was, the second self. She went there to work with the Little Sisters of the Poor, and she created who? The missionaries. A whole other sect of nuns. Incredible group of people. Absolutely incredible people. Now, mind you, think about this. 19 Zacchaeus Street. There's no running water. They go down to the river. They bring it up in buckets. They boil it over fire, wood-burning fires, in order to bathe 1,200 children every single day. Bathroom, a hole with a coffee can. No toilet paper, a coffee can and a hole in the floor. All the sheets are immaculate. That's what the nuns do during the day while they're waiting for the children to come back. Who is she? One day, Bill said, I want you to meet somebody. And I walked in this room, and there was this little bitty person. My daughter is 5'2", okay? About that size, maybe a little bit bigger, sitting there. And she spoke French. But my mother's French Canadian, so I could understand French. I could not speak it. She said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm searching. She said, where'd you come from? Why are you here? I said, I'm looking. I'm trying to figure out who I am. I'm trying to figure out what kind of a person I am. I'm trying to figure out the past to the present and what I'm going to do in the future. She looked at me and she said, you come with me. And I used to walk the streets of Calcutta with her. And she would speak to me in French, and Bill Facey would translate for me. Bill Facey. Bill Facey. Bill Facey, during World War II, and his buddy were from New Zealand. They got stationed in northern India, C.H.O.I.C.E. And one day while they were out there playing war, one of them stumbled on a vein of sapphire. And the people in C.H.O.I.C.E. said, as long as one of you stays here, the other one can go home and sell the sapphire. So they flipped the coin. Bill got to stay and his partner went. And they mined sapphire for 30 years. Bill Facey was probably one of the richest people in the world. But he never looked for it. Because while he was mining sapphire and making sure all that sapphire got out of C.H.O.I.C.E. to New Zealand, where this guy was refining it and making millions, Bill had to have something to do. So he went snooping around and he ran into the Little Sisters of the Poor in Calcutta, India. And he said, wow, St. Joseph's Home for the Poor? He said, I might stay here a while. Give me some time here, and then I could go back to the mountains, check the old vein, see how things are going. Bill Facey. Was an entrepreneur that fell in love with a little nun. He never left. And I'll tell you more about Bill Facey later because it's absolutely amazing where he went. One day, she said, we have a problem. So what's that? She said, you know what care packages are? I said, sure, I know what care packages are. We did that when we were kids. Go out and get money to make care packages. She says, there seems to be a little problem here in Calcutta about care packages. It's okay, so we went out and we walked and we walked and we came to this building that was like a city block and about 2 stories. And she walked up to the doors and the doors opened. She was like that. And she walked in and we walked for a city block and stacked 12 feet in the air. All the way for a city block were care packages, all sitting there in the poorest area of the world. They were storing them. The black marketeers had gotten them. They were taking all the sugar and salt out of them before they gave them to the people for the purpose that care packages were supposed to be. They were stripping them. Mother Teresa found out about their stronghold. And she said to the person who was the heavy, I don't want to come back here tomorrow and see any of these boxes in this building. And I looked at her and I said, lady, you are living a fantasy. You know how many boxes are in this building? The next day, about 3 o'clock, she came and found me. She said, come on, we got to go check the building. So her and Bill and I walked down the street and we walked in the building and it was empty. Empty. And there were trails of care boxes going off all over Calcutta. The population of Calcutta had come through that building and cleared it in less than 3 hours. She says, now I want to show you something. She says, you have a question of spirituality? He said, now I want to show you something. And she took me to Hyde Park, which is down by the Ganges. Horrible place. People sleeping on the ground, feces. It was disgusting. Animals, rats the size of cats. I'd never seen a rat that big. Running around. Children, plus their parents. They're all Hindu. They're taking the contents of the care package, and before they ate it, they were feeding the rats, because the rats are meat-bearing. And Hindus believe that there is a spirituality to meat-bearing creatures. They were feeding the rats. And I said, what are they doing? And she said, practicing their faith. I went, what? I was with Mother Teresa for 90 days, 3 months. We had some experiences. I could go on forever, but I got to check this time. Oop, whoa, we're getting there. I had experiences that I could write books about being around her. She was phenomenal, the kids and the staff, and it was just the most glorious, incredible, spiritual uplifting I've ever experienced, and it's still in me today because I can feel it every day that I wake up. It's there. My mother, when I came back to this country 2.5 years after I'd traveled around the world, asked me to go to her Rosary Society to talk to them about Mother Teresa. You ready? I'm going to do this one right here. And when I did that, I walked out in the church, big church, St. Rose de Lima up in northwestern Ohio, stood in front, Rosary Society ladies, 73 of them. And my opening words were, Mother Teresa is perhaps the greatest con artist I have ever met in my life. And they all went, you called Mother Teresa a con artist? And I said to them, have you got a negative connotation about being a con artist? Or maybe you should think about this. A con artist is an artist who is able to work a con to benefit people. That's a positive con artist. That's who Mother Teresa is. She began doing that years and years and years before I met her. There was a story around that one day all she had was 5 rupees and she had all of these children to feed. And a priest came to her, not necessarily of a certain faith, and said that he needed some money. So she gave him the 5 rupees, knowing that if she gave him the 5 rupees, she didn't have money to buy for the children, that the purpose of her being in India. But she had a spirit. And later on that night, a complete stranger walked up to her and handed her an envelope and walked away. And she opened up the envelope and there were 50 rupees inside to feed her children. She had a major eye problem. She was going blind from cataracts. She was to come to this country and have a cataract operation, so she wouldn't go blind. She got here, she had the money, and at the same time she got here, they were starting an AIDS home in San Francisco. And before she went to have her eyes done, she went to San Francisco, and she went into Pacific Avenue to this beautiful house with all this beautiful, beautiful, beautifuls. And she said, well, we can get rid of that, and we can get rid of this, and I want all this copper stripped out of the building. My 6 stories high, my nuns can carry the water from the basement up to the AIDS victims. And she opened the first aid clinic in this country. And she spent every nickel that she had for her eye operation on that AIDS building. And when she was done meeting with the people who were going to do it, she got a phone call from an ophthalmologist surgeon in Texas that said, I'll do it for free. I was back in this country. I was teaching at North Central State College. I had 28 students in the room. I was about to start talking. It was 8:30 in the morning. One of the students came in and said, did you hear they gave the Nobel Peace Prize to Mother Teresa? I took all my class to breakfast at Denny's. I said, there's no person on the face of the earth that knows how to use that amount of money more than Mother Teresa. She was an incredible con artist. Lawyers, judges, ministers, kings, presidents, prime ministers listened when she spoke. And she wasn't sure she was doing it right. When I was leaving 19 Zacharias Street, she said, I've got one more job for you as you're walking out the door. I said, what's that? She says, I have an orphan whose mother and father are dead. He has no one here. He's all alone, but he has a grandmother in New Delhi. Would you take him to his grandmother in New Delhi? His name was Mohab Khabib. And I said, certainly. So I took him from Calcutta on this side of India on a train trip all the way across to New Delhi over here. I found his grandmother. I took him there. She was happy to see him. And I had completed my task of working with Mother Teresa. 22 years later, in this country, I got a Christmas card from a guy named Mohab Khabib with a picture of his family, and he's still in New Delhi. And I went, wow. She knew. She knew. Princess Diana was killed in a car accident. 1 week later, Mother Teresa passed away. We lost the two greatest women that have ever existed in history in 1 week. It was incredible. It was mind-blowing. Tom Brokaw was in Calcutta, India, at St. Joseph's Home for the Poor at 19 Zacharias Street, interviewing the people who were going to take over for Mother Teresa now that she was gone, and he was interviewing Father Bill Facey, the Sikkim sapphire thief, is now running the show in India. And he became a priest to do so. Spirituality. I've been doing what I've been doing for this year. It's pretty close to 40 years. I've taught people how to work with people at North Central State. I've got a private practice that I've worked with kids and families. And right now I'm getting into helping the homeless a lot more than I have in the past. Moving items, providing furniture, yada, yada, yada. Somebody said to me the other day, "What's your religion, Mo?" And I said, "It's totally spiritual. It's totally spiritual. It's in here. It's in here." Do I believe in God? Yes. Do I believe in what you're doing here? Yes. But I also believe that everything out there is an example of who He is. It's incredible. Every day of my life, I get to watch a new picture show with God at the real. Thank you for the opportunity.